Invasion of privacy. The night was silent, a stillness that felt almost oppressive in its weight. Alone in her small apartment, Sarah lay in her bed, her eyes closed in slumber. Little did she know that a malevolent presence had invaded her home, watching her every move through the lens of her own phone. In the dead of night, a low humming filled the room, a prelude to the camera shutter's click. As the sound died away, the darkness was split by a sudden flash of light, casting Sarah's slumbering form in sharp relief. Unbeknownst to her, this was just the beginning of a long and grueling night. The camera continued to snap pictures, its harsh flash strobing through the room with a merciless regularity. Each click felt like a physical assault, each flash like a blinding bolt of lightning. But the photos were not the only sign of the intruder's presence. There were faint sounds that echoed through the apartment, soft footsteps that seemed to come from nowhere. Every now and then Sarah's phone buzzed with a message or a call, yet when she checked, there was no one on the other end. As the night wore on, Sarah's nerves began to fray. She felt like a mouse trapped in a maze, hunted by some unseen predator. Her thoughts became jumbled, her senses overwhelmed by the relentless barrage of stimuli. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The camera fell silent, the footsteps faded away, and the phone lay still. As the first light of dawn began to creep into the room, Sarah dared to peek at the pictures that had been taken. What she saw chilled her to the bone. The images showed her asleep, vulnerable and exposed, but with a figure standing behind her, out of focus yet unmistakably human. The face was impossible to make out, yet its presence filled the photos with an otherworldly dread. For days, Sarah lived in a state of constant fear. She took precautions, locking all her doors and windows, never staying in the same place for too long. But the sense of being watched never left her, and the pictures continued to haunt her dreams. In the end, it was a chance encounter with an old friend that led to the truth. As they sat in a dimly lit bar sipping on whiskey and reminiscing about old times, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number, yet the message itself was chillingly familiar. "I'm watching you." Without thinking, Sarah showed the message to her friend. He looked at it for a moment, then his face went white. "That's impossible," he said, his voice trembling. "I took that picture of you myself." Sarah was confused, but her friend said, "It was a joke at the time. I haven't done it since. I don't even have that anymore. It was taken from me. I swear, I promise." Sarah was angry and upset, and she stormed out of there, not wanting to talk to her friend. As the truth sank in, Sarah felt a cold fury rise within her. She knew then that she had to act, to take control of the situation and confront her stalker, whoever this was, who took the phone from her friend. It was a long and treacherous journey full of twists and turns that left Sarah feeling more lost than ever. She checked call logs and tried to find where this message was coming from, but in the end, she found what she was looking for: a small, dingy apartment on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that would make even the bravest soul tremble. With a deep breath, Sarah pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of a computer screen. In the flickering light, she could see the figure of her stalker, hunched over the keyboard with a look of grim determination on his face. For a moment, there was silence. Then the stalker spoke, his voice soft and cold. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his eyes fixed on the screen. "I knew you would come." She didn't reply. Instead, she stepped forward, holding a gun out of her to protect her. She then spoke after a moment. "You're sick," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You have no right to invade my privacy like this." The stalker looked up then, and for the first time Sarah saw his face. He was young, no more than 20, with a pale complexion and dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, his hair disheveled and his clothes rumpled. "I had to do it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had to see you, to know you. I couldn't help myself." Sarah took a step back, her gun still held out in front of her. "You're sick. You need help." The stalker didn't reply. Instead, he stood up from his chair and took a step forward. For a moment they stood there in silence, the air thick with tension. Then suddenly he lunged at her. Sarah didn't have time to react. She felt the stalker's hands close around her throat, cutting off her air supply. For a moment she struggled, kicking and clawing at his arms, but he was too strong, too fast. In the end, it was Sarah's gun that saved her. With a desperate move, she swung it up and shot the side of the stalker's head. He stumbled back, stunned, and Sarah took the opportunity to make a run for it. She burst out of the apartment and into the bright light of the day, gasping for breath. For a moment, she stood there, shaking with fear and adrenaline. Then she took out her phone and dialed 911. It was a long and painful road to recovery. Sarah suffered from nightmares and panic attacks, and it took her months to feel safe in her own home again. But in the end, she came out stronger, more resilient than ever before. As for the stalker, he lived, but he was arrested and charged with stalking and attempted murder. His defense was that he had fallen in love with Sarah, that he couldn't help himself. The jury didn't buy it. They sentenced him to 20 years in prison, where he remains to this day. For Sarah, the experience was a wake-up call. It taught her that there are people out there who will stop at nothing to invade her privacy and take away her sense of security. But it also taught her that she was stronger than she had ever thought possible.